gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? By Great 78.
Who gives a fuck about an Oxford comma? I've seen those English dramas too. They're cruel. So if there's any other way to spell the word, it's fine with me. With me.
Chapter 7. A Long December. Draco. December 31st, 1998. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Christmas had been mostly quiet for the 3 eighth years. Theo had a modest pile of presents from his mother's family in Lithuania and from a handful of lovers with whom he'd ended things on good terms. It looked positively mountainous compared to Draco's meagre 4 gifts. On behalf of herself and his father, his mother gave him a new sable fur coat that was far too extravagant for daily use. His elf, Pym, sent a large box of his favourite Christmas treats from the kitchens at Malfoy Manor. Theo gifted him a new compass for his broom, a thoughtful and practical gift, as his had stopped working some months ago. His last gift was finely wrapped in a beautiful red and gold striped paper, tied by a perfect green bow. From the heft he could tell immediately that it was a book. The note affixed read, "Malfoy, I noticed you reading a book on this subject and thought you'd enjoy one with drawings. I hope you don't mind. I already read it. H.G." He tore it open to reveal a gilt cover filled with elaborate and detailed drawings of hundreds of birds. The title read, "Illustrated Birds of the British Isles." His eyes widened as he caressed the binding. She'd gotten him a Christmas present. He might have forgotten to breathe. He flipped it open to find the entry for locks. His eyes were drawn to a quote in the middle of the page. "The male horned lock goes to great lengths to woo his mate. His plumage is always kept pristine, and his strong brow is meant to indicate his virility. But it is his melodious song that truly tells his potential mate how much he wishes to court her." Draco caught sight of himself in the mirror over his vanity. His own plumage was pristine. His brows were, brows. Could he sing? He opened his mouth, considering. Then he shook his head. No, he could not. But this small detraction could not take away from his euphoria. She got me a gift. The thrill of this ran through him like a bolt of lightning. He had, of course, considered getting a gift for her. In Hogsmeade, seeing her shiver and rub her hands together against the cold, he'd eyed the lovely rabbit and ermine muffs in the window display at Twilfit and Tattings. At Honeyduke's, his fingers ran along the display of sugar quills, considering buying a dozen in every flavour for her. But ultimately, he feared she might find it odd, considering that they were merely friendly dorm mates, and he decided against it. Now, however, he had to give her something. Pym. A pup and his elf appeared, wearing a festive pair of tartan plaid Christmas pyjamas. "Yes, Master Draco?" "I need a gift for Hermione Granger," he said quietly. A book." "Yes, Master Draco?" the elf asked expectantly. He racked his brain. He'd seen her read so many different genres. She owned a copy of Hogwarts history. Her shelves in the common room were heavy with fiction and magical textbooks. Then he remembered a conversation with his mother from the summer after his first year at Hogwarts. Flashback. Late June, 1991. Malfoy Manor, Wiltshire, England.
"Tell me about your fellow classmates, my dragon.
I know Potter began at school this year, and of course I already know all of the pure-blood family's children. Was there anyone else in school who made an impression on you this year?" He finished his bite of his favourite speculoos biscuits and wiped his mouth carefully before answering, "Well, of course I had almost all of my classes with Theo and Zabini, several with Potter and Weasley and Longbottom, Macmillan and Boot. Oh, and there are a few mudbloods, 2 wizards and a witch."
"Draco!" His mother's voice was stern. "I'll not tolerate filthy language in my presence."
"Father says it," Draco retorted, hurt. He knew his mother's rule but had forgotten. The lax verbiage of the older wizards in Slytherin had crept unbidden into his own vernacular. His mother's lips thinned into non-existence before she replied,
"Just because your father has chosen to lay down with dogs doesn't mean we all need to have fleas."
"What does that even mean?" 12-year-old Draco had asked her, entirely confused.
"Go on. Tell me about your muggle-born witch,"
Narcissa demanded. "She's not my muggle-born witch," he responded hotly.
Indulgently, Narcissa smiled. "I know, my dragon. What's her name?"
"Granger."
His mother frowned. "That's an odd name for a girl."
Well, it's her family name. Her first name is Hermione."
Draco made a face as he said it, but his mother looked unconvinced. "How lovely," Narcissa said. "William Shakespeare?"
"Excuse me?"
She smiled indulgently. "He's a wizard who wrote many plays, many years ago. One had a character in it named Hermione, a queen, if I recall."
"This one's no queen," Draco said swiftly.
Narcissa only smiled. "Perhaps one day."
Now, holding the illustrated book of birds, Draco had no doubt that she very much was a queen. "Pym, do we own any books by William Shakespeare?" Pym considered. Yes, the Malfoy family library owns several, Master Draco." "Excellent. Bring me whatever we have." He could choose from all of the options. 5 minutes later he emerged from the shower to find his bed laden with books. "Pym, what's all this?" he asked in confusion. The elf turned from where he was straightening Draco's socks in a drawer. Draco tried not to roll his eyes. He always kept his sock drawer neat, and it was doubtful that there was much straightening for the elf to do. "These are all the books by William Shakespeare from the Malfoy family library, Master Draco," Pym informed him. How am I supposed to choose? Which one has a queen in it?" Instantly, the books reshuffled themselves so that only the ones featuring queens were on top. He was dismayed to see that this was the majority of the books. "Bloody royals," Draco muttered. "Right, then. Which ones have a character named Hermione?" Once again, the books shifted, and 2 volumes came to the top. A thick, newer-looking one was entitled The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. Possibly. The other was a handsome, slim tome called Mr. William Shakespeare's Comedies, Histories, and Tragedies. To Draco's eye it looked far nicer, and more appropriate for Granger. Does this one have any others that go with it? As in a set? He asked the books. 3 similar-looking books floated to rest with the first, and Draco smiled. These looked perfect. He conjured a long bit of paper, wrapping the books meticulously and securing it with a temporary sticking charm. He charmed the paper to be a deep green, then conjured a coppery gold length of ribbon around which to tie it. He placed the present at her usual spot at breakfast. When she entered a few minutes later, yawning and stretching, he was waiting with tea already made. Granger frowned.
What's this?"
Draco busied himself, digging in a cupboard, searching for nothing but trying to look occupied. Well, you got me a book, so I thought I would respond in kind. Nothing nefarious, Granger. Merry Christmas."
"Oh, Draco, you needn't—"
"I know I needn't." He turned back to her, an unneeded bowl from the cupboard in his hand. "But I did." She gave him a small smile, then untied the bow, carefully opening the wrappings. Over the rim of his teacup he watched her face closely to see if she liked it. She was stock still for several seconds before she gingerly lifted up the first book, then the second. Next, she placed them both down gently, carefully opening the cover of the first book. She tried to do so with only one finger, as though she were afraid to touch it. Draco frowned. Did she think they would hurt her? Finally, she whispered, "Malfoy." "They're rubbish, aren't they? You hate them." He moved swiftly towards her side of the table, reaching as though to pick them up. "Not to worry. I'm sure the elves can use them as kindling or something."
"No! No!"
She was nearly shaking now.
"But, Malfoy, I cannot accept these."
He frowned again. Was there some sort of enchantment placed upon the books that was meant to repel Muggleborns? Frankly, it would not surprise him, and he hated himself for not thinking of this before he gifted them to her. He reached for his wand to cast a quick detection charm that revealed nothing out of the ordinary. "Why can't you accept them? What's wrong with them?"
"Nothing is wrong with them. But you should know, these books are worth a great deal of money,"
Granger said reverently, her words breathless. Draco smiled indulgently. "Every book in the Malfoy Manor library is worth a great deal of money, Granger." She rolled her eyes, but still looked unconvinced.
"No, Malfoy, I know your vaults are stuffed with galleons and all manner of riches, but this set is worth serious money."
He raised one eyebrow. "Exactly how much are we talking, Granger?"
I don't know exactly. They don't come up for auction very often. But I remember my father talking about it when I was a child. I was maybe 10 or so. If I recall, it sold for around $2 million in New York."
Draco gave her a blank look. "Forgive me, Granger. I've only ever visited Wizarding New York, and I was a very young child. How much is that in galleons?" he asked.
She shook her head, confused. Then she swallowed, calculating quickly in her head. "I would say somewhere around 300,000 galleons."
He gave a small nod. She was right. It was a lot, but nothing outrageous. "All right. So what's the problem?" Her hair was starting to spark at the ends.
"Malfoy, you know what the problem is."
"Yes, I do. Your generous dormitory mate, to whom you gave a wonderful gift, has gifted you an appropriate and equivocal Christmas present, and you are snubbing your nose at it, Granger. Frankly, your manners are deplorable. I thought better of you," he tisked.
She huffed in irritation. "Malfoy, I'm not snubbing my nose at it, or at you, but I don't deserve—"
"What did I tell you about believing that you don't deserve nice things, Granger?" he interrupted forcefully. She was quiet for a moment, appearing to weigh her options. Finally she said,
"I can't accept these."
"You will."
"Please, Malfoy."
"If you don't accept them, I'll instruct my elves to toss them into the fire."
"You wouldn't."
"Granger, I absolutely would. They're yours. Please, take them." The witch looked to be walking a fine line between elation and illness. Finally, she picked up the stack carefully, keeping the wrappings around them so that she would not need to touch them any more than necessary, And don't let me catch you trying to preserve these, to keep them pristine, or some other such nonsense, Granger. Books are meant to be read and enjoyed. You, of all people, know that.
A small smile played on her lips. Thank you, Malfoy.
He raised a brow at her. It's Draco.
January 1st, 1999. Draco lay in bed, fighting against the weak morning sunshine of the first morning of 1999. The brightness was threatening his last vestiges of sleep, and above all, he was not ready to abandon the night. He clung tightly to the glorious dream he'd been having, the result of having spent the previous evening with a rather drunk and giggly Hermione Granger. In the dream, he and the witch had been alone, and there had been a significant lack of clothing and objections on Granger's part. Last night had, in certain parts, gone a bit like the last Hogwarts New Year's Eve that he'd experienced, the one from his 6th year. The New Year's Eve party in 1996 had been raucous, salacious, and ultimately hedonistic, as most of the parties in Slytherin House had been. After the party in 6th year, he had ended up in bed with Tracy Davis, a girl with whom he'd had a short fling in 5th year. They had parted ways amicably around Easter of their 5th year, and because 6th year had been such a miserable time for him, he'd not been with anyone since. Tracy seemed as good an option for a bit of fun as anyone else, particularly in the wee hours of the year when the clock was ticking. But the differences between that 6th year and this 8th year started out quite starkly. Rather than a room full of partygoers, it was just him and Theo at first. Draco was honestly surprised that Theo had not been invited to celebrate in one of the house's parties, but when he voiced this to the other man, Theo gave a flimsy excuse. Draco had the sneaking suspicion that Theo was staying only to keep him company on a night known for debauchery. Part of him wanted to tell his friend to go and have a good time, that he was fine alone, but mostly he appreciated the gesture. Then Granger entered the common room around 9 o'clock in a floaty blue dress that failed to reach mid-thigh on her. The top was a cowl neck that dipped low over her bust-line, and Draco felt the saliva in his mouth double at the sight of her.
"Hermione, darling, you are a vision of perfection,"
Theo effused, standing to cross to her. Draco considered a tarantulegra curse on the wizard. "Oh!" Granger startled, a hand going to the silken curls that framed her neck. "You don't feel like it's too much?"
"I feel like it might never be enough," Theo answered in his seductive tone. Forget the tarantulegra, Draco thought. He'd not been able to pull off one against Potter, but he felt that his Cruciatus curse might work against Theo right now. His blood boiled in his ears so loudly that he nearly missed her next words.
"What are your plans for the evening? The two of you? Slytherin having a party?" she asked brightly, summoning a small purse from her room.
I may drop in on the snakes later,"
Theo answered evasively. But the witch was too smart for that. "And what about you, Malfoy?"
Theo answered heartily, "The same!" just as Draco replied, "Probably just going to bed soon."
"Wait, you're not going to your house party?" Granger's head tilted to the side in confusion as she looked at him with those innocent copper eyes of hers.
Draco smiled amicably. "I'm not really welcome down there anymore, Granger. Turns out one of these doesn't get you into the most exclusive places like it used to."
He plucked at his jumper sleeve, exposing the now silvery pink scar tissue of his dark mark. She stared at him for a moment. Then she said, "Get dressed." He looked down at his clothes, a grey jumper and black trousers. "Am I not—" "We're going to a party, Malfoy. I'm not fussed what you wear, either way, but I know you gits usually are, so put on something nice. Don't make me tell you again."
"Yes, ma'am," Theo simpered, hurrying off to his room.
When it was just the two of them, Draco asked her,
"Where are you taking us?"
"Upstairs."
He was quiet for a moment. He knew she wasn't headed for the frigid astronomy tower in that dress, and she wouldn't darken the door of the divination classroom for any amount of love or money, which only left one place. "You don't think we'll be tossed out on our asses?"
"You'll be with me," she said, with an upwards lift of her chin.
Draco sneered. "You think that will stop them?"
She smiled then, a slow, lazy grin that seemed to set her eyes ablaze. "Let's see them try." The trio walked into the Gryffindor common room 20 minutes later, and though Draco was not familiar with the film trope of a record scratch entrance, he immediately understood the concept. Every head turned to look at them, and the conversation died on everyone's lips. Draco adopted his most regal air, and adjusted his gold snake cufflinks, something he did when he was nervous.
"Hermione, what are they doing here?"
a raven-haired girl asked, in a nasty tone. "They are here as my guests, Romilda," Granger said, stepping forward. Draco was behind her and could not see her eyes, but he recognized from her tone exactly how their copper must have been blazing in defiance.
"We don't mean to disturb your party,"
Theo offered, but was met with an angry scoff from a seventh year that Draco knew from their Quidditch team in years past.
"Bit late for that, isn't it? Why don't you just
have a drink?" A voice that he knew well said from across the room, cutting the other wizard off. At the familiarity of the voice, Draco felt the slightest seizure of annoyance creep into his shoulders, but he forced himself to relax, turning to face the wizard who'd spoken. If possible, the room grew even quieter as the two former enemies crossed the few steps towards each other. Even Draco wondered if the other wizard was about to hex him into the ether beyond the veil. Potter seemed much the same as the last time Draco had seen him at his trial 6 months before, though even Draco had to admit that whatever exercise and diet regimen that the Chosen One had been following was helping him look not so scrawny and specky as he had in their youth.
"Potter,"
he drawled, struggling to keep his tone decidedly neutral. Thankfully, he mostly succeeded.
"Good to see you."
Potter stuck out a hand to shake, speaking in a stilted fashion.
"You as well, Malfoy."
Draco made lightning-quick calculations, deciding at the last minute that he would not be the one to try and mangle the Gryffindor's hand in the handshake. To his surprise, Potter must have decided the same, and they shook normally.
"Thanks for having us."
Theo beamed over his shoulder, reaching around to grasp Potter's hand next, his more ostentatious emerald cufflinks winking in the chandelier's candlelight.
"Swank place you lions have here."
Potter smiled.
"A bit brighter and more cozy than the drab fish tank they had you snakes in, right?"
Theo laughed, but Draco only furrowed his brow in confusion. How did Potter know what the Slytherin common room was like?
"Brought a little something to liven up the party,"
Theo was now saying, withdrawing a bottle of buttery golden liquid from the trouser pocket of his dark green suit.
"Starker. It's a specialty of my family's distillery in Lithuania."
The crowd, which before had teetered uncertainly between shouting and hexing them before Potter had reached for Draco's hand, now seemed cautiously interested. In a matter of moments, small glasses were conjured and distributed to the group, and Draco found himself shoulder to shoulder between Potter and Granger, raising a toast to the new year. He turned first to his right, meeting the warm copper eyes of the Gryffindor witch who'd brought him. "To the new year," she said.
hiding her smile behind her glass. "To new friendships," he answered, as he brought his glass to his lips. The liquor burned pleasantly going down. He could not contain the warmth that spread through his body as her sparkling eyes stared into his. It had nothing to do with the Starker, and everything to do with her. Sod it all, he felt like if he looked at her long enough, he might be able to drink her as well. Then a Gryffindor witch to Granger's right put an arm around her, drawing her away for another toast. Draco turned to his left, almost startled to see Potter standing there, staring at him as though contemplating something. "To the new year," Draco tried awkwardly, raising his half-finished glass. Potter's eyes narrowed. "What's going on between you and Hermione, Malfoy?" Draco's own eyes widened, then narrowed quickly. "Not a single thing, Potter. She asked if we would like to come tonight, and we had no other invitations." Potter's lips drew together tightly. "You know she's dating Ron." "How can I possibly forget, considering how often that particular ray of sunshine graces us with his presence, Potter? After all, he practically lives with us." Draco's words were humourless, but pointed. Potter was in aura training with Weasley, and likely knew exactly how seldom the wizard had come to visit Granger. Potter cleared his throat. "Well, I know he's been busy, what with training and his family," he finished lamely. "I'm sure," Draco supplied. "But to assuage your fears, Potter, rest assured that I'm not trying to move in on your best friend's witch. Granger happens to live in the bedroom next to mine, in my dormitory. Nothing more." Potter, who was lifting his glass to his lips, sputtered a bit before regaining his composure and taking a sip normally. "Methinks thou protestest too much, or some other such bullshit. I can't remember the quote. How much have you had tonight, Potter? Get a grip. You're the chosen one, for Salazar's sake," he answered uncomfortably. Walking back to the common room, Draco walked alongside Granger. They moved as staidly as the alcohol allowed, which he was pleased to see was far more staid than Theo's obnoxiousness. Ahead of the pair of them, the other Slytherin was singing some Muggle tune, off-key with Romilda Vane, who had gotten over her objections to their presence rather quickly after her third Starker.
"They'd better shut up before Peeves hears them," Granger laughed, then hiccuped.
Draco smirked. "Why would the poltergeist be a concern?" As if summoned by the sound of his name, Peeves zoomed through the wall from the nearby trophy room. "Ooh, Mouldy Goldie, now she's an oldie, calling for Peeves and pretending she's boldy." "Best leave off, Peeves, if you know what's good for you." Draco slurred mildly, barely sparing the spirit a warning glance. Peeves did a double take, then zoomed down the corridor, yelling back to them, "Begging your pardon, Snake." Granger stopped walking, stumbling just a bit. She played it off by leaning her back onto the wall to rest for a moment.
"What was that about?"
He stopped as well, turning to face her and overbalancing. His hand came up to stop himself from falling into her, and his palm splayed onto the wall next to her. In his drunken state, he leaned in too close, then leaned a bit closer, as the gardenia scent of her hair overwhelmed him. His eyes fluttered closed as he breathed in deeply. What was the question? He'd already forgotten.
"What was that thing with Peeves?"
"What thing with Peeves?" he asked, still lost in her fragrance. His left hand, which had been in his pocket, now came up to straighten the shawl on her shoulders. She bit her lip, and Draco's eyes trained in on the indentation her teeth made on her plush pout.
"Malfoy, are you all right?"
He looked up into her eyes, and was shocked to find concern there. "Fine. Absolutely corking. What were we talking about?" He leaned in even more, his lips now mere inches from hers. Her eyes grew wide, and she stepped to the side as his forehead dropped gracelessly to steady itself against the wall. The corridor was starting to spin. "I was asking you about your relationship with the poltergeist," she said, her lips curling into a smile. He turned round. It was his turn to lean his back against the wall, a modest improvement which stopped the corridor's rapid rotations. "Not much to tell. The bloody Baron is a distant ancestor of mine. Peeves is scared peckless of the Baron, so he stays out of my way as well."
"That must be nice,"
she said lightly. "I can be, sometimes," he slurred, reaching a hand towards her. Hesitantly, she put her own hand out, and Draco grasped it, using it to pull himself upright again, even as his other arm pushed against the wall to stand himself up. They stood there holding hands for a few seconds, before Granger dropped his hand and asked, "You can be what?" "Nice," he said, reaching back down for her hand and tucking it into the crook of his elbow to continue down the hallway towards the 8th year common room. Granger hummed, as though to say that the matter of whether he could or could not be nice was still to be decided. But she kept her hand where it was, securely around the bottom of his bicep, as they meandered drunkenly towards the dormitory. Once inside, Draco was pleased to see Granger drop to the sofa, instead of stumbling off to her private quarters, as he'd expected. Perhaps the night wasn't quite over just yet, he mused. He shucked off the navy suit jacket, tossing it carelessly in the direction of his bedroom doorknob. Somehow his magic managed the feat of hanging it neatly. He stepped towards the kitchenette, calling over his shoulder to her, "Tea?" She lifted her head from the back of the red sofa. "You!" she yelled merrily. Pardon? What?" he asked, swaying a bit. He grabbed the wall for balance. "No, silly. I isn't the next letter. It's V." Then she dissolved into a cascade of giggles, leaving him as confounded as ever. "Granger, are you all right?" he slurred earnestly. "I'm right as rain, Malfoy," she answered, hiccuping once more. Her copper eyes were half-lidded and slightly crossed now, and Draco smiled hugely, having finally caught on. "One of my father's favourite jokes," she answered his unasked question. "I see." "Ha ha, clever. I see you too. But in answer to your earlier question, no. Is there something stronger than tea?" His eyebrows climbed into his hairline in surprise, but he just turned back to the cupboard, searching without seeing through his drunken confusion. She wanted to have another drink with him. The bottle of Ogden's in the cupboard above the sink was nearly empty, but with his defences discarded by the earlier alcohol, he carried off a replenishing charm easily. He brought the now half-full bottle and 2 glasses back to the little coffee table in the sitting area. When he had a finger each of the amber liquid poured into the glasses, he gave her one. "What are we drinking to?" she asked in a fuzzy voice. Draco's grin was lopsided. "To freedom, in all of its forms." I like that. "To freedom," she repeated, and then sucked the glass dry, smacking her lips and smiling when she was done. "Granger, can I ask you a question?" Oh, no. Some infinitesimal part of his rational mind thought. His mouth was about to ask something that his brain was not prepared for. "Of course," she drawled, stretching her arms wide and falling back onto the sofa. It appeared that the fall was further than she thought, and the surprised look on her face was a bit comical. "What exactly is a lank?" She tilted her head. "Sorry, did you say yank, like an American?" "No, lank." He spelled it for her, very slowly, as his mind was having a hard time keeping up. L-A-N-K. "That's not a thing," Granger pronounced, reaching for the bottle again. She sloshed what looked to be the equivalent of about 3 drinks into her glass.
"Where'd you hear it?"
"Dunno. It is a thing. Some kind of muggle thing," Draco answered, holding his glass out for her to fill. She did so without protest, and he sipped greedily, knowing that he would be paying for this later.
"Nope. Lake's not a noun, that's an adjective."
"Now you're just making up words, Granger," he said.
"You did it first, Malfoy. A lank is not a thing,"
she finished, certain of herself in her drunken state. "Okay."
"Ill!"
Granger started giggling as she tipped towards him, then realized halfway through the breath that she didn't have the energy to sit up straight, under her own power, any longer. "Oh no, the letter game again?" he asked, laughing along with her as he caught her by the shoulders. She looked up at him with huge copper eyes.
"No's not a letter. You lose."
Her voice was soft in the sudden quiet. He stared down at her, not wanting to breathe for fear of scaring her away. He spoke just above a whisper. "Okay."
"Oh, 2 letters. That's better."
They sat like that for a long moment, her leaning against him and him holding her up, looking down at her, nearly held in his arms. If he leaned forward right now, he thought, he could kiss her easily.
"Malfoy,"
she whispered. "It's Draco," he whispered back.
"I need to go to bed."
"Is that an invitation?" he smirked. These words seemed to rouse something in her, and she struggled mightily to sit up, making slight noises of protest as she did so. He pushed against her shoulder with one hand to right her, even as his other arm came around to steady her. She tried to stand, but immediately fell back to the sofa. He chuckled, then stood with only a bit less struggle. Holding out a hand to her, he pulled her up easily, when she placed her hand in his. They were face to face now. Draco's arms came round her, holding her gently but firmly as she swayed. "Granger, let me help you to your room," he mumbled. She smiled and closed her eyes, and Draco took this as a positive sign. Still holding her a bit closer than necessary, he moved them both towards her bedroom door, opening it wandlessly as they approached. Inside the room, the light gardenia fragrance was heady and dizzying in the best of ways. Looking at the bed in front of them, Draco wanted to dive into it, pulling her with him. Instead, he walked her towards it slowly. The more steps they took, it seemed, the more she leaned on his chest, her shoulder tucked under his arm. He looked down to see that her eyes were closed as she turned her head to nuzzle her face into his white Oxford shirt. He seated Granger on the side of the bed, and she grabbed his hands, seeming to not want to let go for just a moment as she swayed, eyes closed and a lazy smile on her face. Her face was upturned, and she looked so utterly kissable in that moment that he had to fight hard against his urge to press her into the bed behind her and snog her senseless. But something on her nightstand drew Draco's eye, lit by a single candle held safe under a stasis charm. There, in the pool of light, glinted a photograph of her, Weasley, and Potter. In it, Granger and Potter were both laughing whilst looking at the camera. Weasley grinned like a buffoon in between them, and as Draco watched, the ginger git looked first at Potter, then at Granger, throwing his arms around the two of them. The possessive, fierce look of desire that overtook his face when he stared at Granger was both obvious and familiar to Draco. He knew it sometimes crept across his own face when she wasn't looking, just as she'd not been looking at Weasley in this photograph. But his look of pining, would not be welcome here, he was sure. Potter's words came back to him from earlier in the evening. "What's going on between you and Hermione, Malfoy? You know she's dating Ron." Draco did not care, even a little bit, that Granger was dating the Weasel. No, that wasn't true. He hated that she was wasting any of her precious time and energy on the tosser. But he also knew that even if by some miracle she forgot about Weasley for a moment and allowed herself to be kissed, she would never forgive herself afterwards. He would not be the source of any more pain and regret for this witch, not if he could help it. She sighed suddenly and dropped backwards onto the bed, her head landing gracefully on the pillow. Her voluminous curls tumbled in soft waves over the silky Gryffindor red sheets. His breath hitched, and his cock stirred in his trousers. She blinked slowly at him, smiling dreamily. Then she rolled away from him, and was asleep in a matter of seconds. Draco chuckled, reaching down to remove the tall silver high heels that the witch still wore. He tucked her feet under the blankets, pulling the blankets up to cover her body gently. She moaned quietly in her slumber, a beautiful sound that Draco's mind locked away instantly, a treasure not to be shared. Then she moved her legs a bit to get more comfortable, and Draco realized that he really needed to leave the room, just in case the witch awoke to see exactly how much she had affected him. Back in his room a couple of minutes later, lying in bed, he allowed the memory of the last few minutes to linger in his mind. Over and over again, he played the visions of her smiling up at him, nuzzling her head against his chest as he helped her to the bed, and then falling to the bed with her hair fanning out onto the pillow. His liquor-saturated brain kept coming up with different versions of how the night could have ended. In some versions, she slapped him for his impudence, just as she had several years before. In other versions, she helped him take off his trousers, caressing his throbbing cock in her small, cool hands as they lay together on her bed. He bit his lip, eyes closed tight, to hold on to this image. He wanted every version of her. He reached into his boxer briefs and drew out his cock, hard and throbbing despite the alcohol. His fingers feathered up and down his hard length. Then his right hand gripped the stiff base of his cock, whilst his left squeezed up the shaft to the engorged head. The thick bead of precum dripped wet from his tip, and his hand glided back down his considerable length. Then he was pushing, thrusting into his hand to completion, picturing the witch's smile, her dress, her hair. The sound of that little moan she'd made in her sleep played over and over in his mind as he came. He gave a great sigh into the darkness, muttering the incantation to clean himself. One day, if he was very lucky, perhaps he would hear that moan again, and perhaps next time it would mean something.
Gives a fuck about an Oxford comma. I seen those English dramas too. They're cruel.
Thank you for listening to Who Gives a Fuck About an Oxford Comma by Great78. If you enjoyed the story and would like to listen to more, please follow me on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts by searching for Silver and Copper. Or you can find me under Great78 on Archive of Our Own.